Hey guys, we're going through the museum today. We're just trying to give a brief explanation on kind of how to position yourself and to use the museum effectively. We're going to go through the War Museum and we're going to try and make things as simple as possible. The War Museum has 4 different types of artifacts. It has 2 weapons, 2 armor, and it has 4 war equipment. And it has 3 legendaries, at least in Space Age right now. So a lot of people get confused on this because it works a little bit differently than your regular multiplayer museum. So what the museum enables you to do is essentially make your nation unique and allow you to get really good at the style of attacks that you want to do. You can make your nation a defensive nation or an offensive juggernaut, however you want to approach it. Now, we're going to go through the weapons first. Weapons essentially increase the damage that particular troops that you have do, and it also decreases the amount of hit points that your opponents are going to have. And so it gets kind of confusing. So if you think of weapons in terms of an offensive player, you want to increase the damage that your troops do. Now, the armor part increases the amount of hit points that your units have. Now, having armor can also decrease the amount of damage your opponents can do when they attack you as well. So it's kind of a little flip-flop there, so it takes a little bit of getting used to. So the issue with weapons is they are hard to find. Ideally, you're going to need at least 20% boost on something before you notice a difference, and 50% before it becomes a game changer. At around 75% of a boost, of a total boost, that becomes basically a go-to strategy or a go-to unit. So for most people, they want to find at least 2 of whatever they're trying to boost on each unit. For the way I'm set up right now, I'm boosting fighter damage with these 2 particular weapons. So I have 4 total lines of fighter damage. Now, a good weapon or a good artifact is going to utilize all 5 lines. So anything that's less than that is basically just a placeholder. So it's okay to upgrade those, but you're basically still looking for a better artifact. You're looking for that perfect artifact. So a perfect artifact is one that boosts all the type of strategies that you use or the specific units that you use or nerfs the units that will be attacking your base. So the other thing you have to remember is that while the percentages are the same, the effect of those percentages are different. So for example, taking heavy tank damage, heavy tanks do a lot of damage. So increasing that damage by 10% is significant. Now let's say riflemen. Riflemen don't do a whole lot of damage. So increasing their damage by 10%, you're not even going to notice it. So be very careful how you are boosting or nerfing units because you may not even notice a difference. Now, typically units that are often boosted are bazookas, heavy tanks, fighters, or even bombers, depending on what strategy you're using. So ideally, you're looking for artifacts that have at least 2 of one of your go-to units on, and ideally has all 5 lines that you're going to use. And that includes weapon and armor. And sometimes you're going to match different armor with different weapons. So if you're going to go fighter heavy on the weapons, then you're going to want to make sure you're increasing your fighter hit points in the armor section as well. Now, the next section is going to be the war equipment. Now, this is actually the playing field that you're fighting on. So these type of artifacts are affecting how fast your troops spawn in defense and how fast your opponent's troops are going to spawn on defense. It's going to help determine how many hit points different towers have, how much damage they do, how much damage or health the troops themselves do on defense. And so this, in my opinion, is where your battle is won and lost. And this is, you have to be very careful. You have to have maximum flexibility with your war equipment. So you get 4 units, you have 4 artifacts, and each of these artifacts has 5 lines. A keeper artifact has all 5 lines that are usable. And ideally, each line will affect a group of towers or affect a global variable. You do not need to have a line. I'll give you an example of one. Here's one. Having enemy redoubt hit points, that is completely and totally worthless. Nobody cares how many hit points the enemy redoubt has. That doesn't affect strategy at all. And ironically, missile silo damage also totally and completely irrelevant. And the reason is because the silos already do a tremendous amount of damage. Adding 12% to that is not going to make or break anybody's attack. Either the unit's going to be consumed by the initial hit or it's not. It's pointless. Now, if you look at this particular artifact, the reason I like it is because I have two 15% enemy defender spawn times, which is essentially a boost of 30% in terms of decreasing how fast the enemy troops spawn. That's huge for me because that's one of my focal points. Plus, I have a all enemy defensive tower hit points nerf at 12%, which works well with the other artifacts I have. So this is one of those units that, yes, I like, but it's kind of on the gray area in terms of actually being a unit that's a keeper. Now, I have another unit that I like a little bit better. This one also has two enemy defender spawn times, a little bit lower, but it also has two enemy defensive tower hit points, as well as an all enemy defensive tower damage. So each one of these lines affects multiple towers, not just the 3 sniper towers or the 5 anti-air towers. You want your war equipment to have global effects. And when you take 5 lines, each line having a global effect, and you combine them with all 4 artifacts, you can make a significant difference on the battlefield. What we usually recommend is you have artifacts that typically are more offensive focused and artifacts that are more defensive focused. That allows you to go defense or offense and have a bigger impact. When those are mismatched throughout, it makes it harder to swap them out. But these 4 artifacts in terms of war equipment give you the maximum flexibility. So if you're decreasing the hit points of enemy defensive towers and you're decreasing all of them, then that means all your offensive units essentially get a 10% boost in firepower. That's not technically mathematically correct, but it's giving you an offensive boost. So even if you're not able to boost your bazooka damage in the weapon section, if you can nerf your enemy defender tower damage, you're giving them a huge boost. So if you approach the museum from a long-term standpoint, I think you'll do quite well. If you find a unit that has the first 2 lines that are good and you don't have anything else there, there's nothing wrong with keeping that and even maxing that out. But I wouldn't start upgrading more lines because you're still waiting for a better unit. Now, this one here, I have 2 fighter damage, which gives me a 24% boost plus a 10% heavy tank. I would much rather have another artifact that has the same fighter damage, but take out the paratrooper damage, and no one cares about armored car damage. So this is basically a placeholder artifact until I get a better one. Now, why do you need to know what artifacts are good and what artifacts are not good? Because you need to be able to have an eye to look for which ones are good when you get them. Because you may get an artifact that will work great in Space Age, but you may be in Global Age. You need to be able to realize, hey, that's a good artifact. I need to hold on to that. Maybe you don't have bazookas yet, and you get an artifact that has a 30% bazooka damage boost. You need to hold on to that artifact and go, hey, that's something that I can use later. Now, right now, if you're below Space Age, artifacts are really tough because in Space Age, we can do blueprint mining, and we essentially recycle artifacts over and over and over again until we get the right artifacts. So if you're not in Space Age and you're struggling with your museum and things aren't just looking right and everyone's posting these great artifacts and you're like, I don't have any of these, don't worry. Don't feel bad. You'll get there. What your goal is while you're working your way up to Space Age, if you find some artifacts that are valuable, hold on to them. They'll be much easier to upgrade once you get to Space Age. In Space Age, upgrading artifacts is not a huge deal. It's just finding them. Anyway, so I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys have a great day.